So former SAA board member Yakhe Kwinana has been explaining her role on the board of the national carrier in testimony that has at times frustrated and infuriated the Deputy Chief Justice. I'm joined now by Khaya Sithole, Chartered Accountant, academic and analyst. Khaya, thanks so much for your time. You know, you wrote an article, I think in August, for the Daily Maverick on Vuyo Nzeko. You described Kwinana as your favourite chartered accountant and said the commission was going to be lit. I'm wondering if it's living up or down to your expectations.
Look, it's definitely lived up to expectations, but even I could not have expected that would be at this level. And I think the basis for what we've seen today is, of course, the fact that at two companies being SAA Technical and SAA, there were a lot of issues relating to procurement. And I think what the State Capture Commission has done is that it's identified a few very critical transactions and tried to identify the various role players that were either from inside the company or from outside the company. So what we saw at the beginning of this year was that the head of procurement, Mrs. Memela, was the one that was brought into the stand, where she had to explain her interactions with the internal stakeholders and the external stakeholders. And of course, that's when the name of Nzeko first popped up. Mr. Nzeko himself, being an external stakeholder, had to then explain the basis of his interactions with the head of procurement, Ms. Memela, for whom he bought a house, but he claims that he was buying land from her mother. And of course, he also had interactions with Ms. Kwinana herself, where it's now alleged that it was on the basis of a forex transaction. So this is really a continuation of a very entangled relationship involving internal and external stakeholders, particularly at SAA Technical.
You know, Yakhe Kwinana is a chartered accountant. She also served on the board of SAA. She should know a lot about both, but it seems she seems to lack a basic understanding of what are the rules of separation and things you can and cannot do. But it was interesting, Michael Apple, chatting to us a little earlier, said that she seemed very expert when she was speaking about issues around Bitcoin and that sort of thing. So what is your assessment? Is this a chartered accountant and a board member who simply doesn't understand what it is and it's an indictment on the calibre of board members? Or is this someone who knows exactly what she's doing and simply doesn't want to answer questions?
Look, even if she wasn't a chartered accountant, the moment she assumed the role of board member at SAA and SAA Technical, and then eventually became the chair of the SAA Technical board, she actually put upon herself the obligation to know how these things work, to understand what interactions are regarded as proper and what interactions are regarded as improper. So she didn't need to be a chartered accountant in order to understand those things. The reason we keep emphasizing that she is a chartered accountant is that unfortunately it is then embedded in the training curriculum and of course in the way chartered accountants tend to practice. So then she cannot dispute the fact that she should have known better. So I think that's why people keep highlighting the fact that she was indeed a chartered accountant. Now this idea that she's a person who doesn't know what is going on was completely clueless. It's the same story that we saw with Nzeko, where it seems that plausible deniability is their only defense, and of course plausible deniability is always amplified if you simply pretend that you knew nothing about what you were doing. But it would be completely ridiculous for anyone to believe that this was a person who actually didn't know what she was doing. She knew what she was doing, and on the basis of the fact that she's been found out, she now wants us to believe that she knew nothing about the rules, and of course her breaching the rules was purely accidental, but of course we know that's completely not true.
You, I know, Khaya, have watched the mess that SAA is in currently with a very astute eye. Do you see a direct line between the kind of testimony emerging from the State Capture Commission, stuff that happened 5-6 years ago, and the mess that the national carrier is in today? Is this exactly why SAA is in such a complete disaster?
Well, in fact, in this case, it's probably the only time Praveen Gordon and I are going to be in agreement about this, in that it is unfortunate that there was too much interference on the SAA operational matters by people who were supposed to be non-executive directors. So we've seen clear illustrations of that from the testimony of Kwinana herself. And of course, once an entity's governance structures have become so compromised by people not knowing where the lines are to be drawn, who's responsible for what, who's accountable for what, then that governance structure has broken down completely. And I think if you now reflect on the testimonies of the people that we've seen who were the executives at SAA dating back from the testimonies of last year, and you're now getting some insights from the non-executives, it's very clear that the boundaries were far too fluid for this to be a stable organization. And of course, the effect of all of those things is what we're seeing now, where SAA will take a long time to recover, if it ever recovers, from just how it was mismanaged by people not knowing where their boundaries were and also interfering in order to tailor or redirect contracts in their own preferred directions.
Well, thank you very much for your insights this evening. That is Khaya Sithole, Chartered Accountant, Academic and Analyst.